We are live. Okay.
Incoming challenge.
We have an incoming challenge somewhere. Foxy openings. Aha. You never know the people that will show up.
Game started.
What do you play against a guy? Foxy openings. They have openings on almost every opening in the book. What do you play against someone like this? You play chess, hopefully. What's he going to do now? E5 is an interesting move. Okay, he's going Dutch on me. What should I do? Okay. Maybe castles was a little more precise. Okay. It seems to me he's committed pretty early to this pawn formation. I'm just going to wing it, ding it, wing it. But now I was thinking that I'll zip this guy up here. Zippy up there. I don't know, e6 seems like it could be a little tender. Now his bishop on there is hanging. Yeah, for example, if he goes queen c8 to protect the bishop, bishop h3 probably has some annoyance value. I don't know if it's that strong, but certainly some annoyance value. Aha. I'm not sure if that's the right knight to capture with. Okay, now some tactics on the b7 bishop, but never so clear. Tactics. Can he castle? Aha! So he gives up the bishop pair, but how apropos. Our presentation today is actually on the bishop pair. Oh man. One has to think we should be able to get to that king. Well, we got to try. I'm trying to provoke e5. Although I may wind up just provoking. Okay, now. Now, knight f6. Do we play bishop g5 and pin him and go for the opposite colored bishops? Oh, looks pretty tempting. But let's hold on to the bishop pair just a little longer. That baby's in there. We could have visions of d4, queen e2, queen a6 mate, or just a4, a5 was my original intent. Now, of course, in positions like this, you got to be careful that you don't get too carried away with yourself and overlook something. But it does look pretty promising. Bishop g5 is definitely going for the opposite colored bishops. But I figure freeze that. That way we freeze his c-pawn, because that might be a key defensive lateral thing at some moment. Yeah, now he's attacking this guy over here, so we want to save that guy.
Server announcement.
Now, what's he going to do with the e5 pawn? We got possibilities like bishop f4. But my main cheese is that I just wanted to run the a-pawn up. Oh! That's a free pawn, and very hard to resist. Well, if I go queen g4 and get greedy, he's got queen b4 bailing out. Well, let's just snip this. This one's hard to resist. On queen b4, I was thinking this looks pretty good. Just try to anchor everything in there. His knight, if I put the bishop on c6, he can harass me with knight b8. Although that said, then I got queen g4 check. But if he puts the knight on f6, then I can anchor the bishop in on on c6. Now in that scenario, he might get the pawn on d3 back. But yeah. I guess I got to play bishop e3 first. Yeah, looks like I need to throw in a bishop e3. And then he has queen a3. How annoying. Yeah, maybe c4 is a little bit too loosey-goosey. Bishop c6 was better. Then on knight b8, queen g4 check. Darn it, that would have been better. That would have kept him in the box. Okay, so I think he missed the moment. And now I think the danger's passed, so let's just get on with the party. Yeah, he's in trouble here on the clock. Okay, so what's he want? He wants to go knight c5 or something? Let's just full speed ahead and hope something good happens.
Black challenge.
Okay, so we got Ohanesian, we got Orange Ball wants to play 1-0. Haven't played Ohanesian in a while.
Started.
Okay. Guess I gotta keep an eye on the camera, see where we are. Okay. I remember I had a decent game out of this once, but then I just kind of fumbled it around and didn't handle it too well. And kind of frittered it away. One of my students had a game something like this the other day. Let's see how he deals with that. Okay, play could get a bit tricky. Well, it already is. Whew. Yeah, his last move kind of weakened his F7 point. Oh, no, no, no. This is not going to be happy. This is going to hurt. Oh, Tibmag is here. Cool. Just in time.
Black resigns.
See the chicken bone
Incoming
in there.
challenge.
Oh, no. Now he wants another game. I guess fair is fair.
Game started.
Anyway, thanks for showing up. Okay, what do you do against the Sicilian? There's a question. Okay. Against the hypo-accelerated. Oh, you're one of those guys. Good choice. Yeah, good choice. Yeah, I saw something about playing like this, but it's a little tricky. Arena Crush plays like this. And the question is, are we supposed to play here and here first? It's a bit tricky. Some very tricky stuff with knight a3 and bishop c4 and that kind of stuff. Yeah, and he's going for it. And frankly, I don't remember if I was supposed to play bishop g7 first. Okay, now he's threatening the fork on c7. Very good, Ron. Keen eye for the obvious. I'm not proud of putting the knight on a6, but could be some problems. What's that do? As I say, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China? Okay, now he can take it back with the rook. Okay, I get that. But what about if I go there? He has to go back. Then I could go crazy, go there.
Check.
I'm not sure that I don't know what I'm doing here. Maybe that was a key moment for me to castle or play bishop d7 maybe? Yeah, maybe castling was not the best. Maybe I should have pedal to the metal. Bishop d7, then a4. Okay, let's get rid of this guy and hope we're not just bringing more attackers in on us. His knights are swarming.
Check.
I guess the good news and bad news, is at least we're getting all our bits out, we hope. Okay, so now we officially have opposite color middle game position. I wanted to throw that in because I was afraid if I played knight a4 he would play oh, that's unpleasant. That is a good move on his part, darn it. Oh, darn it. Very good move on his part. I overplayed my hand. He's got the back rank check. Rats. Yep, good play, dude. Darn it. Yeah, E4 was over. I overpressed. And now, gotta hope we get lucky. No, it's not good. No, it is not good. Ah, geez. Same frickin' motif.
Check. Check.
But at least we get that guy down there back. Rook endings. Maybe we'll be able to save the day. Who knows? Aha. He saw what I was up to. 6'1". Maybe, just maybe we have enough counterplay to squeeze a draw.
Draw offered.
Okay.
Game coming draw. Challenge.
Good game. I got a little lucky there. Okay, Nizhmedinov, 5-2, challenger plays black. 5-2, challenger plays black. 5-2. Let's do 5-1. And Nizhmedinov has this ridiculously low rating. So let's see. We do random color. Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, somehow you let me slip away. I thought Rook D5 or something. Timag, yeah, I got the email on training material. Been swamped lately. And yeah, I'm not really playing 1 minute. That's a bit fast for me. As you can see, I'm rated 1500 at 1 minute. Bullet chess. You guys pre-move and all that good stuff. Yeah, Hanesian, I was lucky to escape with a draw in the rook endgame. But let's go ahead and do the presentation. Okay, so view my profile. Okay, one of the features I like, as I've mentioned before, is that we get the most recent games that we had. You can see I had the game with Foxy Openings, 2 games with Ohanesian. Very lucky that second game. And then we have our own library. And our library will hold up to 400 games here. Okay? So, you can see all the games from the previous presentations are in the library. Okay, number of rook in games that we went through for a while. Okay, then we started in on the bishop pair back here with Steinitz. Okay, early examples. Then we covered Lasker. looked at Tarrasch, and classic 2-bishop sack. And now today, we're going to look at move up to Alexander Alekhine. And I very much like this game. This is a game Alekhine's playing black. We're going to go ahead and flip the board here. And black side of the exchange Rui. This is an opening where you get the 2 bishops, but you get the double pawns, okay? So one of the things that you can do is you can actually design your opening repertoire to try and get the bishop pair as much as possible. And d4.
Server
now, of course,
announcement.
Fischer came along in the 60s and rehabilitated the Dutch player Barendrecht castles on move 5. But before that, they played d4 for quite a number of years. Okay, so pawn takes, queen takes, you trade, and in this situation, black has the double c pawns, okay, but he does have the 2 bishops, and white has the 4-3 kingside majority. So in theory, Andy Soltis did a book years ago on the Fischer exchange variation, and one of the things he did that I really liked in the intro was he just showed this king and pawn endgame and showed how white would go about systematically winning it by bringing his king to e3, playing pawn to f4, eventually making a passed pawn, and these double pawns are, you know, kind of semi-useless, very hard. You can't actually force a passed pawn. So, before you get to the endgame in this type of position with black, you need to create active counterplay for your bishops, or undouble your pawns, okay? So Alekhine does a great job in this game. He plays c5, kicks the knight, develops the bishop, and now a very typical motif here. Well, first he plays c4, sacrificing the pawn. Very interesting idea. White takes it, and then bishop a4, touching this pawn. Now, if you play knight a3 to guard the pawn, well, of course, bishop takes, and bishop takes is at least equal for black. Probably pretty equal. Or he could just let it sit. So he plays c3. But the problem with c3 is that takes away a very active square for this knight. This knight usually comes out to c3. So now, castles. And what I like about what Alekhine does here is he's not in any rush. He just positions his pieces. Now the move f3, pluses and minuses. It strengthens your pawn on e4, so your knight from d2 is free, okay? But it weakens this dark square diagonal, and we can see Alekhine jumps right on that. Well, a4, knight f6, and now bishop a3. Very logical play. When you're facing the bishop pair, quite often you want to try and trade one off. That way you know which one you're fighting against. Okay, but Alekhine, first he goes in, taps the knight retreats to a much more passive square, and then he backs up. a5. Well, he didn't want him to try and steal that pawn, although bishop e7 was a counter. But now rook d3, penetration. And this is a theme that I've seen a few times, where white lets go of his light square bishop in the opening, and then in the later stages of the game, the player playing black is able to use light squares to penetrate, and suddenly white is kind of like, hey, where's my light squared bishop to keep him out? So pawn goes to c5, protecting this pawn. So you can see white is very materialistic here, but Alekhine is all about mobilizing the army. Okay, so now what to do? Well, that move avoids rook d1 check, but it also puts the king on line where it's being x-rayed by this bishop on a7. So, knight back to d7. Black plays knight d3, figures he'll gain a tempo by attacking the bishop on c2. But Alekhine, very sharp, not one to miss a combination, plays knight takes pawn. Critical moment. Of course, if you play bishop takes, then you are seriously pinned. And if you try to play knight takes this bishop on c2, we have knight takes pawn double check, king goes back, say to e1, then you have bishop f2 check, king over, rook down check, rook takes, and you wind up with a back rank rook, knight, and bishop back rank mate. Okay? So in the game, he played knight to d4, bishop back to b3. Now, of course, trying to take that and take that is going to be difficult, because then you're going to be seriously pinned. So he played king over, attacking the rook. But the rook just bailed out by taking the pawn. Now the knight on d4 is under attack. He goes bishop back, attacking the rook. And now a very typical Alekhine combination. Bam!
Check.
Rook takes check, and knight back to e6. PP on the PP. Put pressure on the pinned piece. You can see the knight is attacked 3 times by the bishop, the knight, and the rook. In addition, it's only defended twice, and the 2 people, the rook and the rook, that could possibly come defend it, that square is covered by the bishop. And if he just plays one of these rook moves, trades, wholesale exchange, he's just going to be a pawn down in the king and pawn in game, hopelessly lost. So, he played rook up, attacking the bishop. But now, vintage Alekhine, knight takes. So of course if you play rook takes, have knight takes. If you play bishop takes, he's got bishop takes. And when he tries to run with the king, very pleasing finish. The bishop taps the rook. The other rook comes over. I'm not sure how he thought that would help. But now, check. Cuts off the retreat square, cuts off the g3 square, and a beautiful 2 bishop finish.
Check.
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 Check. And
checkmate.
Bam. Checkmate. Absolutely beautiful textbook play by Alekhine. Penetrating, the pawn sacrifice with c4, penetrating, play against the pin piece, and then the final mating attack with the 2 bishops and the knight. Beautiful play. Okay, so let's see who else we have after Alekhine. Okay, we have another world champion. In fact, the player that Alekhine beat, well, lost to and then beat in the rematch. I think the first match was 1935, and then 2 years later in 37, he beat him in the rematch. Max Erva, playing white. Okay, now again, like I said, you can design your opening system. I used to play this queen c2 against the Nimzo Indian. And basically the idea is when you reach a position like this, you take, and then either the bishop loses time, or he takes the knight, and then you're able to take with the queen, and you don't get the double pawns. But you're a little behind in development.
Check.
For example, after takes, knight takes, you know, Black's got 2 knights developed, he's ready to castle. White still has to get all these kingside pieces. So short term, Black has some development, chances for initiative. Longer term, White has more space in the center and the 2 bishops. So White's job is he needs to neutralize those knights. Now, going back, speaking of that, Black playing moves like d6 actually helps White achieve what he wants, because you give White time to go ahead and get set up. And now you can see the knight comes. Interesting that he puts the knight on f4. You would have thought the knight might go to d4 to try and clamp down on any b5 action, but here it looks like he's trying to focus on stopping any d5 action. Castles, bishop e2, and you can see Black's play is very slow, and now rook over. So if he takes the pawn on c4, he'll probably get pinned, or at minimum lose the pawn on d6. So he goes back, but you can see Black's slow play has totally played into White's hands. White has been able to get castled, totally caught up in development, secured his space advantage, and now what follows is just a textbook example of gradually pushing him back. Okay? So knight back. Okay, that's a 1-move threat, but queen comes back. Now you can see the pressure on d6 keeps this knight tied down, which keeps the black rooks disconnected. Knight goes back, pawn goes up 1. Notice if he goes up 2, the bishop might come in, annoy the rook. So very patient play here. And now, kerthunk. So much for patience. But if he plays pawn takes, he'll regain the piece on c6, and then Black will just be stuck with a backward d-pawn, plus this bishop will have a fantastic diagonal on c4. So he goes away. But now he attacks the bishop, and now he collects a second bishop. So Black's got 2 knights. But what is the problem for the knights? Is they don't really have a really nice outpost in the center. For example, if this pawn was on e5 and this knight was on e6 and he could sink one of the knights into d4, that would be an outpost. Then he would have chances of neutralizing the bishops. But as it is, you know, right now, white just simply has a space advantage and the bishops, and now he keeps that knight off of b4. Well, black lashes out to try and get counterplay with f5. But the problem is, in a strategically inferior position, sometimes when you lash out like that, you just make things worse. So after he takes, rook takes, and now pawn to f4. So this f pawn and c pawn are definitely not as weak as this e6 and d6 pawn. He goes back. Now queen d3, that's an interesting move. I would have been so tempted to play bishop to f3 or bishop to g4. So the knight maneuvers. Now, interesting, nice finesse. Of course, he's not expecting his master opponent to allow bishop takes rook check, but what he is hoping for is either the rook will retreat, in which case he could take the knight and take the pawn, or he provoked a weakness. Okay, so now he gains tempo. Queen goes back. Bishop realigns, and I like what he does here. First, he stops any knight h4 action. Again, all Steinitz principles, using your pawns to take away squares from the enemy knight. Now, he would like to line this bishop up against the king, but he doesn't want to hang this pawn on c4. So let's see how he solves that. The bishop slides back, more protection for the pawn, and now he gets his bishop lined up on the serious side. Pawn to d5. And now, very interesting idea. A temporary pawn sacrifice. He just slots that guy in there. When he goes pawn takes, simply sidesteps. Says, okay, you got the pawn, but I don't think you're going to be able to hold it. Meanwhile, your rook is under attack. So after rook takes, black tries to trade down. But with all the rooks off the board, first he kicks this knight. Very nice touch. When the knight goes back, queen takes. That way this pawn is still defended. And notice how these knights are on the edge of the board. Goes knight back, attacking our bishop. Well, no. We don't want him taking that guy. No. Bishop back. That stops any queen d2 penetration. And possibly you can play queen d4 to force the queens off the board by threatening mate. Pawn to g5. Well, he takes it, and then pawn to h4. Now the plus and minus for black. He traded a pair of pawns there. The minus one is that he further exposed his king, and two, he gave white a 2-to-1 pawn majority. Yeah, he got a passed pawn, but his passed e-pawn we don't feel is going very far. Knight goes back. Now he goes queen over. That starts to threaten possibilities like queen b8 check, or maybe queen into f6. Notice that e5 might open up this bishop. Very unpleasant for black, so he tries to trade queens, and white agrees. But now watch how the bishops totally abuse the poor knights. You can see this recurring pattern. See how this bishop covers several squares? This bishop covers squares from this knight. We've got some semi-domination going here. Aha! But now we see bishops work on both sides of the board. Okay. Now here, I would have thought pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, so that you get those pawns as far away as possible from the short hopping knights. But he didn't go there. He just went after this guy right away, and probably because he saw he could win a pawn by force. Like, for example, if knight g7, then he can probably just go bishop to c7, track this guy down. He goes back, and now he goes after this guy. And he takes,
check.
And check. Now you would think, with so little material on the board, white might not be able to win the game. However, watch how the bishops really strut their stuff here.
Check.
Check. You can see the king has some issues. He goes king up. Well, of course, knight to f6, pawn to g5. Notice the king can't go back to f8 because bishop c5 check. So he goes king to g6, bishop f5 check. Very unpleasant moment for white. for black. If the king goes to f7, you take a second pawn, 2 connected passed pawns, easy peasy. The only other choice is what he did in the game, which is king to h6. But then, bishop taps the knight. When the knight moves,
Check.
very nasty bishop check is almost checkmate. The only move is to self-pin your knight. And now, the king comes up, knight goes in,
Check.
pawn check, wins the piece. But black's last hope is to try and wipe out all the white pawns. The bishop defends the pawn. Now
Check.
he goes knight check. But the other bishop to the rescue, you take that guy off, walk your king up the board, and when he tries to get his king back, his hope is to play king h5, pawn to h6, trade the last pawn. Not going to happen.
Check.
You have the nasty discovered check, and black actually resigned here. The finish, of course, would be pretty obvious, something like that. But very textbook game on space advantage and the 2 bishops. Bam! Right out of the opening. Beautiful game by Max Erva, former world champion. Okay, now, going down the list here, what do we have next? The Russian School of Chess. The Russian players quite took to the bishop pair. And now we have Boleslavsky, who is considered quite an opening theoretician in the 1930s and 40s. Okay? And we're going to see a nice game where he shows bishop pair technique. Okay, Philidor defense. Get a few people playing like this. Castles. Oh, and now very, very nice touch here. He plays pawn takes pawn. Now you could, of course, take with the knight. After takes, he shows a very nice tactical motif. Remember, again, we said you can kind of design some of your openings to try and secure the bishop pair. I see Magnus Carlsen, white side of the Slav, bam, he plays knight h4, chases down that bishop on g6, and then computers say theoretically it's equal, but he knows that that's the kind of position where once he gets the 2 bishops, he's got some chances to, either gradually or quickly outplay him. So anyway, nice touch here, knight to g5. Well, of course, that threatens the f7 pawn. Knight to h6 is not really too happy because queen to h4, h5 could be very annoying. You got a triple hit here, and the knight on h6 is not well placed. So, bishop takes. Looks like white lost a piece, but he's got the nifty double attack. Threatens queen takes pawn mate, and threatens to recoup the bishop. After the more or less obligatory queen takes. And then you get this endgame, which computers probably say is close to equal for black, but there's equal, and then there's practical play. So knight up. Knight to d2. You can see white's a touch ahead in development, knight back, and bishop back. But, like if this pawn was on c4, and black had the white bishop locked in and control of the d4 square, the knights would have a better chance. Now here he goes here, f3, very useful move. Unlike in the Alekhine game, yeah, he weakens this diagonal, but he owns the diagonal. And what f3 does is A, it guards the pawn on e4, and B, it keeps this knight from coming into g4, harassing your bishop. Okay? Knight to h5. Now, a lot of times with a knight on h5, you can play g3 at the right moment to keep that knight from coming in. Karpov, very big fan of that, told me that a pawn on g3, very useful. Okay? First, though, stops b5 and gains a little space. And now, rook over, bishop back. A very interesting move. I would have thought he was going to play a5. Party on. But he wanted to get this c4 square for his knight. Now after b6, then he trades rooks, and then he plays pawn to a5. Well, of course he's inviting him to play b5. Now if he takes twice, he's got to watch out for tactics. Bishop takes c4. The a file gets open. But here again, we see black using tactics to try and survive, while white is incrementally improving his strategic play. So let's see, what does he do here? He just plays a quiet move, bishop to b3. Now here he played bishop takes c4. Not a fan. I think he should have probably, for better or for worse, played pawn to b5. And then when the knight moves, trade the bishops, get the knight to e6. He may need to put his pawn on a6 and try and hunker down that way, get this knight back to g7. Not a big fan of giving up the second bishop. We've seen this mistake in a few games, notably the famous Botvinnik Bronstein. What was it? Game 23 of the World Championship, Game 24, 1951 World Championship. Nakamura gave up the second bishop against Carlsen, lived to regret it. Okay, so not a big fan of giving up that second bishop,
Check.
but he figured he'd hold things up, but the check. And now look at this bishop. Just like we saw in the other game. Comes to touch the kingside pawns, but black again uses tactics. First he attacks the bishop. This bishop comes all the way back. Now interesting, he went there instead of to e3. He secures that, and the trick is, if you take this pawn on h7, he's going to go king to f7. Try and trap your bishop. When you go rook over, he'll go rook d8, and that bishop is in trouble. So, first he stops any rook d8 nonsense. Now he's got the possibility to take that, and on king f7, rook to the d file. He goes after the bishop this way. Bishop comes back. Again, you don't want to take and let him go king g7, although even then you still have rook d1. King up. There we have it, g3, keeping the knight out. Knight has to go back. Pawn to c4. That gives white a tough choice. Gives black some tough choices. If he takes, you take with the bishop and you're perpetually attacking the pawn on a6. If he lets you take, if he takes with the a pawn, of course, your a pawn becomes passed. And if you're able to take bishop into d5, followed by rook to the c file, it's going to be game over. So c4, nice move, opening up for the bishops, while this knight and king are still on the other side, and this rook is still passive. So he goes rook to the c file. Now he puts his rook on the c file, so that he's ready to take. He tries to keep it shut, and then this move I really appreciated. He plays c5, very committal, not afraid to anchor it in there, but showing understanding that he's fixing all these pawns. Now, for example, he may play rook up and take that pawn on b4, or he may play bishop up and target this guy. Black rotates his knight back. He might have been better playing knight to e6, but I doubt the position can be saved. Targets the pawn on e6, rook over, and this is sad. You're using a rook worth 5 to defend a pawn worth 1. Now bringing the king up, typical good play. Now, finally the knight has an outpost, but the middle game is long past. We're in the endgame. Pawn to f4. And now rook over.
Check.
King attacks the knight, knight goes back, and pawn to f5. Again, very interesting pawn play, because after takes, black now has a connected passed pawn. Flip side of the coin. The white king now has a beautiful square on e4. And now he starts advancing on the king's side. Yeah, the knight comes in, but nothing to attack. Rook up, sends the knight back, and then pawn up. Now, in fact, if you play pawn takes pawn, king takes, and the knight could be a bit trapped, and your f-pawn is mobile. So he plays knight to b5. But now he actually chops it off. And again, unpleasant choice for black. Whichever way he takes, white is going to get a passed pawn. And now he just secures his space advantage on this side. And you can see the poor black knight does not have a great future. Well, he brings the king over, rook over, king back, push, rook over, but now, unfortunately, he lets the pawn start to advance. And push, and now the coup de grace. Beautiful finish. The only guy stopping your a-pawn from promoting is this rook. So, defender elimination. bam, rook down. And black resigned. If he plays rook takes pawn, hoping for bishop takes and king takes, on rook takes pawn you go rook takes knight check, king takes, and then bishop takes rook. And if he tries to go knight here, well, then you just take
check,
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 check, rook over,
check,
check, push the pawn,
check,
check,
checkmate.
and checkmate. But a beautiful example from the Russian school by Zag Boleslavsky of bishop pair technique, right out of the opening. And I like this idea that he used knight to g5, where he was all over the f7 square. Black felt compelled to take, and then queen h5. So he goes like almost immediately into this queenless middle game where he's got the bishop pair. Very nice play. Beautiful example from the Russian school of chess. Now, speaking of the Russian school of chess, another great player, Alexander Kotov, probably best known for the book that he did, seminal work, Think Like a Grandmaster. Now, that book, offered a lot of the Russian training secrets. It's a bit dated because time controls are not the same, rules are not the same. For example, you can no longer smoke in tournaments. Okay? And so, but nonetheless, Kotov was quite a good grandmaster himself. And let's just take a look at one of his efforts. Okay? So again, okay, this is a Queen's Gambit declined, takes, exchange variation. Okay? And what black does in this game, all pretty normal moves so far. I mean, moves like knight e5 might be normal for white, but then black will play knight g6 or knight e6. Castle's queenside. Well, that clearly signals that he's going to play g4 or g5 and try to attack him like nobody's business, or maybe knight e5 first. Well, black plays queen a5. King b1, typical move. You get off the c file, guard this pawn over here on a2, a little extra. Now bishop b4. This is dubious because you don't really want to take that knight. Well, knight comes back, getting ready to roll over to the queen side, also added guard on e4. And now bishop takes, queen takes, and pawn takes. And I have no idea why black thought this was a good idea to give white the bishop pair to go with his flexible pawn center, but that's what he did. And so some of these things just were not as appreciated at that time. I guess he thought he would get activity with his knights, but watch how white curtails his activity. First, the king comes up, that guards the weak pawn on c3. He invades. Now he trades one, but then he doesn't trade and give up the second bishop. Then you just have opposite colored bishops. Now instead, he just takes a chill pill, guards the f2 pawn, and that's the guy that's going to boot the knight. Now here he goes there to d7. Maybe bishop f5 would make more sense, because then on f3, then you could play your knight. No, but you don't have knight d6 available, see, because the bishop's covering. So bishop f5, pawn to f3, wins a piece. So that's why he made this, quote, half-developing move. But now after rook over, he opens up, gets rid of the knight. Steinitz principle, use your pawns to kill the enemy outpost. Knight goes back. Notice the knight can't even go to d6 to try and hold up the c4 square. So now the king comes over and helps out. That leaves the white rooks active. So again, we got a situation where the enemy knight doesn't have any good outpost. Now a little minority attack on the queen side. Knight goes back. A little minority attack. And what can he do? He can't really defend that pawn because, again, this bishop operating at long range covers the b8 square. So he pushes the pawn. Of course, if he takes, that would allow rook penetration, followed by the other rook coming to a1. You'll recoup the pawn. Tremendous pressure. Now, pluses and minuses. That keeps the b file blocked, but it also weakens some squares like b4 and c5. So he goes rook up, pawn up. Interesting move, pawn there. That crimps these kingside pawns. And now white has flexible possibilities of breaking with either e4 or g4 after he gets it organized. Well, rook up, bishop improves, pawn up, and now that gives white the moment he needs to execute the g4 pawn break. Because since he's trying to open up the king side, and he's got the bishops, he doesn't mind creating an imbalance. King up. Well, if we go back, of course, if he goes pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, then after bishop takes, it's equal material, but we have a passed h pawn, and we also have our rooks coming to attack this g4 pawn very, very quickly. So black tries to keep things blocked up, but now opens the g file. Takes, takes, and creates a potential target on h5. Rook to the g file. You can see superior mobility. Check, and king over, rook over, and you can see white is first to the g file. I saw Gadakamsky win a game like this. Very similar idea, where he traded off everything, and then his king just went king c2, b3, b4, and he just walked right in an opposite color bishop ending. Absolutely beautiful. Well, the same thing here. Maybe Gada got it from this game. And now king up. So the problem black faces here is that if he goes rook over, trades rooks, you might even play a6 and then go bishop in and snip this guy. So this explains black's desperation here.
Check.
He plays c5 for the sole purpose just trying to keep the king out. Because look, if the king goes in, then this knight can never move because the king will keep penetrating. And then you're ready to play bishop in, attack the pawn. When the pawn comes up, the king just keeps rolling, and you're going to eventually get zugzwanged out of your pawns. So that's why he plays c5. But of course, this is desperation. Things are falling apart. He takes that, and he goes a6, trying to lock things up. But now white has one more pawn break to blast things open. Pawn up. When he takes, he takes. Now, of course, if he takes there, bishop takes check is pretty deadly. He would just take and then reline this bishop to e3 to d4. So he goes rook up, but now white collects a second pawn. This is just too many. The black pieces can't stop the tide, but I like this next move. Bam! Rook g6. Penetration and overpowering. Of course, if he plays rook takes rook, pawn takes check, fork, the rook tries to go back to a safe square, but the bishop exerts its power. You can see this bishop working beautifully on both sides of the board, attacking the rook and protecting his own pawn, and by extension his own rook. Well, rook takes a6, and I believe black tossed in the towel at this point. 3 pawns down, rook to the 7th, zapping all his pieces. Just any number of ways to win. Pawn in, shoving the pawn, overpowering him. Just powerful, powerful performance by the player playing white. So, that concludes our bishop presentation for today on the Russian school.
Incoming challenge.
Okay, we got someone here. Here's Mednov. 5-1, plays black. Oh, and rated. Oh, man.
Game
You're
started.
killing me. You wanna eat all my rating points. Okay, so what happened? So I played d4. Okay. Yeah, it shows your clock is running, sir. Don't know what to do there. I'm just having a nutriment to try and get a few vitamins. Why don't we abort this game and then start over? How's that? Abort.
Game aborted.
Yeah. Okay. And then we can start over. That's fair. I don't want you playing with half a board. That would be a little unfair. Okay, can you send another challenge? Did you get your board sorted out, sir? Oh, yeah, I got your email about the training material. Just been crazy busy at school because got a new room this year. Enrollments are like up another, well, what is that, like another 5 to 8%. And so the school is very cramped on space. So, been spending the whole week cleaning out a closet, making space for the Spanish teachers. Hablo español. Awesome. Great people. And get my own room, my new room, ready for school, which starts next week. So that's been keeping me busy.
Server announcement.
Should we go out in the pool? See who's out there. Pure 5-minute game. See if anyone wants to play. Otherwise, we'll go do some tactics. Or do some training.
Incoming challenge. Game started.
Do you have your board set up? You got everything set up? I'm going Kasparov on you. I have to go back and review my notes on the killer Latvian gambit. I saw the video by the butcher. First he shows how to play with white. Yeah. And then he plays the Latvian gambit himself and says, I don't think these guys are too well prepared. Good videos, the butcher. By the way, thanks for sending the video. Appreciate it. Knight f3, considered a bit tame, but actually has something in mind. He waited weeks for d4. Oh, okay. Sorry about that, Tony. Okay. We're just kind of winging it here. I'm not getting my pieces trapped here. That's a good move.
Server announcement.
Well, today's theme was the bishop pair. Always tricky business with this guy. Always. Always some tricks. I mean, there, he could have played bishop e6 and then take twice and then take with check. Here, this should be pretty okay for us, I think. Now, if he goes knight b6, where do we put that bishop? Like I was saying, where do we put that bishop? Let's chill, go back here for the moment. And where do we put our king? Probably a more important question. Yeah, the quote aggressive move would be to play bishop back, but that would just encourage him to throw his pawns at me. He does not seem like the kind of guy who needs any encouragement. And where do we go with this guy? I was debating where to go there. Then I figured I probably need to keep, actually h4 there. Try and keep him honest. Then where does he go with his king? Good question. Let's go for it. Try to make him think about which way he's going with his king. Seriously? I think he's right. In one of his emails he said, you pretend like you're a strategic player and you're really just a tactician. I think he may have a valid point there. That threatens a little nasty on b8. Ah, wasn't even the best move.
Checkmate.
Yeah, he could have played king b7. Queen a5 was actually the best move. Okay, thank you for the game, sir. I got no rating points because he got a ridiculously low rating, sir. Okay, what's next? Okay, and people watching, make sure you may have to re-up your Twitch notifications, you know, so you get heads up. But we should be pretty much every week now for the next several weeks, as far as I know. Hopefully all goes well. Let's see who's out there. See if we can get in trouble. Should we try a 3-minute game? Now, another feature that I like is practice and improve. Okay, so since our theme tonight was the two bishops, let's see how you actually checkmate with the two
Game
bishops.
started.
Okay, what does it say? 16 moves. Not so worried about doing the precise number of moves. Main thing is to have a program. And our program here, step 1, we organize our two bishops. Now he's in the triangle. Step 2, bring our king up. Now if we move our bishops forward, he'll come up. So we're just going to use our king and then push him back. Okay, we got our king in the game. Step 3 is push him to the edge of the board. Now he's on the edge of the board. We want to make sure we don't stalemate him. So let's see which way we're going to go. I guess we could go this way. Now here we got to pick which side we want to go to. We're going to send him to this corner, the H8 corner. Now he's trying to come out this way on G7. If we pull that bishop back, he'll go back. So we're going to use the king. Now we need a waiting move. Right now our bishop cuts him off from D8. Other bishop cuts him off, so we're just going to make a waiting move here. Now think of the bishops as like little sheepdog herding him along. We got him in the corner. He's trying to come out. Our king keeps him boxed in. He's trying to slide out, but check.
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 And checkmate.
Checkmate.
What can I say? We did it in 17 moves. It said 16 was optimum, but I'll take it. The main thing is to have a program, have a system, and not just aimlessly check them. In fact, if you notice, we didn't even check them at all until right here at the very end. All the way to here. And then the last 3 moves, let's see, was check, check, and mate. So it's all about squeezing them in to the triangle. Now, the other one that's actually pretty trickier is the king and queen versus king and knight. Is surprisingly
Game
not so easy.
started.
So I think the way I understand it, the first thing you do, well here of course we've got to get our king in the game, but you got to watch out for those tricky knight forks. For example, king d3 coming closer, bam, knight e5 check. So the goal here is that you have to separate this king and knight. That's the trick.
Check.
Okay, now where to go to keep that little rascal under control? For example, there, you don't want to go king f3, knight check. You got to watch out for the tricky knight forks. Okay, check.
Check.
Now we're pushing him back that way. Make sure you stay out of harm's way. And then,
Check.
I think one technique that I learned is kind of keep the king from the other side. You can see we're making a little progress. Now if we check, he'll interpose the knight. If we check on e6. But we have other things we can do. We can check this way, for example.
Check.
Now you see we pushed him back, but we can't go king up. So maybe a little waiting move. Is that the best? We could go here. Now again, watch out for knight forks. This looks safe.
Check.
Now our king is in close, and he can't check us. So now I feel like we're very close. But what's this trick if we go king c6? If we go king c6, I think we've achieved separation. Now there's also queen check, king c8. Then when you go king c6, he has knight d8 check. But I think if we go this way, he only has knight to a5, unless I'm missing some tricky trick. And then we can try to chase that guy down.
Check.
And now if we go king over, have we succeeded in trapping the little rascal? I think we have. Okay. Once you remove that guy, then of course it's easy. Now what's the technique here? Again, you don't have to do a lot of checks. You play moves that kind of box the queen in. As a rule, anytime you can nail him to the back rank or the edge of the board, and then you just bring the king across. He's in his little box, he's not going anywhere, and in your face mate. Okay, so we took 21 moves. I suspect it's probably supposed to be quicker than that. Says we could do it in 17. So there might have been some quicker ways earlier. But good practice, you know, to play these training pots. Now the one that's really tough is the bishop and knight checkmate. That takes about 35 moves. So we're not going to do that one tonight. Let's see what else we can do. See if there's anyone else out there to play. probably get a 3-minute game.
Game started.
Uh-oh. Sideburns. Haven't seen him in a long time. This guy's dangerous. Plays very fast. If I go d5, he's going to play knight takes d5. This guy is such a pain. Now we finally got that guy guarded. Oh darn, now he's on this one. Crap.
Check.
I should have played b6 to guard that thing. This guy's really got his systems down, man. Don't they all? Don't they all? Why didn't I go e5 there? This guy plays great. I'm overlooking a tactic here. Maybe I should play knight back to f7. Okay, at least we're not behind on time. Oh man, I could have sunk that rook into f4. That would have been sweet. Anyway, I feel like we're doing okay here. We got a pretty good position. Hold on. You're supposed to take that guy off, Ron. Yeah, we got. Oh, he saw it. We had the nasty knight rook down threat. Hard for him to get in on the king side.
White resigns.
Yeah. If he goes bishop to d1, then we got domination with rook a1. Otherwise, he doesn't have a good way to guard the c2 pawn. And we've done a good job of boxing him out. Thank you for the game, sir. Long time no see. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up, I guess. Call it a night. And hopefully we'll see everyone back next week. Thanks to ICC for, sponsoring us. And thanks for Sandro for keeping an eye on all the technical stuff. And to Foxy Openings and Paul Azuro for doing our game editing. Videos of this should be posted in about 24 hours or so on ICC and on the ICC YouTube channel. Again, thank everyone and hope to see you next week.